I have all I could need, but not everything I want. You may say I have reached the stars and I found none. My dreams are my own, but I can't do this alone. I need everyone I can get to make my dreams become.
Hello, my name is Anthony DiRigello. My pronouns are he/him, and I am a young white man with short light brown hair, sitting in a black wheelchair, and using a non-invasive ventilator to assist with breathing. I'm 29 years old and live with a muscle-weakening rare genetic disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. 2 years ago, the pandemic made it more difficult for me to connect with my friends, family, and other people living with a rare disease like my own. I'm so grateful to have attended the One Rare Experience, a virtual rare disease conference, because that is where I met the co-founder of our Odyssey, Seth Rotberg, at a social meetup he was hosting. I cannot put into words how it felt to talk with other young adults about what I was dealing with. I was no longer alone. I had 20 new friends, and it felt like I had known them my entire life. Our Odyssey is the main reason I am still so positive and empowered, even after my difficult week in the hospital last November when I had my feeding tube installed. As I lay awake all night, unable to sleep, I thought about our Odyssey. Every blood test, every day without food or water, every tear I cried. The memories of our Odyssey gave me the courage to keep fighting, keep on hoping, to hold on and to survive, to take on the world.
'Cause nothing's gonna stop me, no one's gonna slow me down. Nothing's gonna scare me, no one's gonna let me down. You may think it fazed me, and that may be true. I'm ready to take on the world with you. I'm ready to take on the world and take on the world.
I am a board member of Our Odyssey, a nonprofit that connects young adults impacted by a rare chronic condition with social and emotional support. Since its founding, Our Odyssey has been able to serve about 500 young adults annually in over 130 different rare and/or chronic conditions, 36 states, and 4 countries. Through programming such as social meetups, interactive educational workshops, Our Odyssey provides a reminder that no young adult should feel isolated and that we're all in this together. We invite you to take on the world with us, because this is not my Odyssey, not your Odyssey, it's our Odyssey. There are so many ways you can be a part of this journey. Join us today at ourodyssey.org. Thank you.
Nothing's gonna stop me, no one's gonna slow me down. Nothing's gonna scare me, no one's gonna let me down. You may think it fazed me, and that may be true. I'm ready to take on the world and take on the world with you. I'm ready to take on the world and take on the world with you. I'm ready to take on the world and take on the world with you. Are you ready to take on the world and take on the world with me?
Hi and welcome. I'm Megwin Sanders Andrews, Executive Director of Our Odyssey. I am a middle-aged white woman with brown hair in front of a plain cream background. Our mission at Our Odyssey is connecting young adults impacted by a rare or chronic condition with social and emotional support in the hope of improving their quality of life. And we are so pleased that you are able to join us for this live stream on making rare disease advocacy a career. Special thanks to the generous sponsors who support our live streams, Albareo and Ipsen Company, and BioMarin. Thank you too to all of our Odyssey's donors and supporters, including Amgen, Alexion Charitable Foundation, the Global Genes Mental Health Impact Grant, Sarepta Therapeutics, Town Fair Tire, and of course, all of our generous individual donors. Speaking of our generous individual donors, today is Giving Tuesday. We have a gift for you on Giving Tuesday. We're doing a limited edition run of long-sleeved blue t-shirts with our Odyssey's message on them. Any donor who gives $100 or more during the month of February will receive one of those limited edition t-shirts. You can check them out on our social media. Also, a few announcements about upcoming events. Our Odyssey holds social meetups for young adults with rare and chronic health conditions twice a month, as well as an expressive arts program, a life skills workshop series, and gaming and music live streams. For information about any of our upcoming events, please check out our website at ourodyssey.org and look for the tab that says Upcoming Events. And now I'm so pleased to welcome you to Making Rare Disease Advocacy a Career with Ella Balasa and Taylor Kane. Ella and Taylor are both young adult rare disease advocates who have taken their advocacy to the next level by working in the space professionally. They will take you through their journeys and share their best tips and tricks on how you can start taking steps toward a career in the rare disease space. Taylor's passion for rare disease advocacy began in grade school, shortly after her father died from the rare X-linked condition ALD, and she learned that she was a genetic carrier of the disease. Not only did Taylor help raise substantial money for ALD research, she successfully lobbied the New Jersey legislature and governor to enact a law requiring the screening of newborns for ALD in New Jersey. Over the years, Taylor has become deeply involved in the rare disease community, speaking at numerous rare disease-related events and contributing to a variety of campaigns as a thought leader and voice for the rare disease community. Taylor is the founder and consulting executive director of Remember the Girls, an international nonprofit organization which aims to break the stigma facing females with X-linked disorders. She also champions the needs of the rare disease community and works to foster communication and trust-building initiatives between biotechnology, pharmaceutical, and genomic companies and their patient populations as a consultant, Taylor Kane Consulting. She is an award-winning activist and accomplished speaker and a respected author, having recently published a memoir, Rare Like Us, From Losing My Dad to Finding Myself in a Family Plagued by Genetic Disease. Ella is a patient advocate, consultant, and a person living with cystic fibrosis. She has committed her time to empowering patients and advancing healthcare strategies. She speaks publicly about the value of patient perspective and has a passion for distilling clinical information for patient communities. Through opportunities working with healthcare organizations on content strategy, writing, speaking, clinical trial development, and sharing the patient experience, she aims to affect the healthcare landscape by raising awareness of rare diseases, promoting self-advocacy to patients, and valuable insights to organizations. Taylor and Ella, thank you so much for being here. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you for having us. I will start with the next slide. So yeah, I'll give my presentation first, and then Taylor will present after me, and then we will have some time for Q&A and also just to ask questions of one another as well. So again, my name is Ella Balasa, and I was born with a genetic lung disease called cystic fibrosis. And for those that are unaware, CF is a disease that causes a buildup of thick mucus in the lungs. And over time, this mucus attracts bacteria from air that we breathe in, and then these bacteria form infections. And then over time, this cycle of infection and inflammation in the lungs leads to lung damage, lung deterioration, and then eventually respiratory failure and a shortened life expectancy. So I was diagnosed with CF at 18 months old. So when I was very little, I was always, my mom would say that I always had just sinus and chest infections, always coughing, finally, at 18 months old, I was diagnosed with pneumonia. And so that's when the pediatrician was like, okay, there's got to be something more wrong with her. Because up until that point, they just thought I was, severe allergies and things. But anyway, at the time that I was diagnosed, the life expectancy was about late teens, early 20s. So I've now far exceeded that. I'm 31 years old. Time goes really fast. But over the course of my life, the symptoms of cystic fibrosis have certainly affected me, and at some points more severely than at other times. Growing up when I was younger, I would have to spend multiple weeks in the hospital getting treated for these lung infections with antibiotics. And really, antibiotic intravenous courses are really the only really effective treatment for cystic fibrosis, other than the daily inhaled breathing treatments, as you can see in some of these photos, that I have to do still to this day, multiple times a day. So it's to do these nebulizers to open the airways and breathe in the aerosolized treatments that just helps to remove the secretions from the lungs, so that the bacteria, there's less mucus for the bacteria to harbor and to grow in. So as I said, these lung infections require these hospitalizations throughout my life. As I started to get into my early 20s, these infections were more and more difficult to treat, requiring longer courses of antibiotics, more frequent infections, and my lung function did start to decline as well, pretty significantly. And at this point in my life, I have about 30% lung function remaining. So, on average is 100. So you can imagine I'm fairly limited in what I can do physically, as far as, can't really hike or any sort of significant physical, exertion. So I'd say despite that, I've always tried to make the most of every chapter that life has given me. And, with that, I think that this photo here in the top right-hand corner is a great depiction of, to me, life despite illness, because I'm sitting in front of the Colosseum in Rome, and I know Taylor probably will talk to you about her travel experiences, maybe to some degree, and what she's been doing recently. But, travel is also a really important part of my life. And it's something that, I really want to be able to do more and more of, and hopefully in the future. But it has to, for me, because of my limitations, I have to live my life in a modified way to a degree. And that means, doing these breathing treatments when I am in public, and, to allow me to be able to breathe better and to be able to continue doing what I want to do. And so, really, this picture depicts life despite illness. And so I think it's something that I like to talk about quite a bit in my presentations. So I'll go on to the next slide. So as I said, in my early 20s throughout college, CF was, a significant barrier. And I did graduate though, and had to miss some time. There were semesters where I was in the hospital for a few weeks at a time. And there were times that I wasn't sure, what would happen the following year, or whether I'd be able to graduate, or, what my future would look like. Nonetheless, I did graduate from college and got a degree in biology. And shortly after graduating, I started working in a microbiology lab. And that's where I started to see my value as a patient who has dealt with a lot of these, healthcare obstacles in my life. And at the same time has this understanding of how the disease affects me on a scientific molecular level. And I wanted to realized I wanted to bridge those gaps between the patient, other people that live with diseases like myself, and then the research community. And I saw that there was opportunities there for me. So I guess I'll backtrack to, so the research that I was looking at in the lab was microbacteria from river water, and some of these same bacteria thrive in the lungs of people that live with CF as they do in the environment. And we're also looking at their antibiotic resistance levels. And because of the heavy use of antibiotics with people that have CF use antibiotics a lot, this leads to antibiotic resistance. But this is something I'll talk about in a little bit. And so, as I said, this connection between my work, my health, my lived experience, and my also interest in connecting with a broader disease community with other people that live with CF and just rare diseases as a whole. That's where I started to begin getting involved in bringing the patient voice into research. And so I initially started volunteering with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which is the national organization for people living with CF here in the US. And they started what was called Community Voice. And this was opportunities for people with CF to contribute to various aspects of improving care and treatments for people with CF. So I initially started serving on a committee that was it was called Protocol Review Committee. So I was looking at clinical trial protocols and giving the patient perspective on how those can be optimized and improved for us as participants. They also had an inaugural research. It was called Research Con, and this was a research-centered conference for the patient community. And so I was helping to develop the themes and topics that were of interest to our community that researchers would kind of collaborate and talk together with the community about. And it was a virtual conference. And so I helped to organize this this was in 2019. So those are some of the first few, I guess you could say, advocacy sort of opportunities and involvements that I had early on, and where I could use my, lived experience and perspectives. Simultaneously to that, as I said, I wanted to connect more with the CF community and the rare disease community more broadly. And so I started writing about my experiences. So some of this was just introspective writing about my life living with CF and kind of the emotional ups and downs of that. And I had a blog on what is it's called CF News Today. So it was a news source, but they also had some columns that some patient advocates had that they were writing their personal experiences on. So my column was called This Lung Life, and that's what the little lungs there are in the top. And so that's also where one of the first things that I was involved in really, sharing my patient's story and getting comfortable in, being vulnerable and putting myself out there and, wanting my story to help other people in navigating their health journeys as well. So that was that's a summary. I guess there's one other area that I was involved in with another cystic fibrosis nonprofit called the CF Roundtable. And this again was all around the same time. I was kind of doing all of these things sort of simultaneously. And that was a CF nonprofit where we created a newsletter for the CF community. And we had CF stories, and we had a blog. And I was tasked with creating part of this blog that was called the Research Corner. And we were partnering with some pharma companies that were developing new research in drugs in the CF community and writing like patient-facing, community-facing materials about new drugs and new research that was upcoming, new clinical trial opportunities for the CF community. And so that kind of, all of these different things helped me to feel more comfortable in communicating with researchers, with the pharmaceutical industry to some degree, and kind of build, starting to build my network in my community across the healthcare industry. So then later that year in 2019, I got really, really sick with a particularly bad lung infection, and I was in the hospital, and I was on intravenous antibiotics. And around that time, and I'd always been, as I just said, really involved in understanding what was research that was happening in CF at the time. But I had come across, and again, I was doing a lot of writing at that point, and it was just kind of serendipity that I had come across I was reached out to by a company that was developing a documentary about a patient with CF that was treated with an experimental treatment called phage therapy. And I won't get into the details of this, but it is basically using a virus to attack a bacterial host. So it's sort of like an alternative to antibiotics. So it's currently not an approved therapeutic in the US, but there are increasingly more research and clinical trials being done right now with it. But at the time in 2019, it wasn't really widely known and wasn't widely researched. But I was contacted to write a synopsis about cystic fibrosis to go along with this documentary that they were creating about a patient in Texas who was being treated with this therapy. And so I immediately was like, well, I have been struggling with lung infections due to antibiotic resistance. Infections haven't been working for me. I want to be able to try this treatment too. And so I reached out to researchers directly at Yale, and that's where in the video, the documentary, that's where the researchers were doing this. And, they were pretty receptive to treating me as well. We had communications throughout the next month or so. I, talked to my doctor about it. He was kind of like, well, if there's not much research, if you think this is something you want to do, you can go ahead. So something that I really took on for my own care and made that informed decision for myself. And this was something so anyway, long story short, I did go to get this treatment. It did help to clear that acute infection that I had. And this experience really solidified, in my opinion, like that value of our, being a self advocate for ourselves, and understanding how we can make informed decisions for our own care. And I knew that if I wasn't as involved in my own care as I was, if I didn't have a good relationship with my doctor, if I wasn't kind of involved and interested in research and in kind of finding out what is out there for CF, I don't know that this would have come across my path. So I ended up, after this treatment, I wrote an article in the HuffPost about this experience, not only to raise awareness of this new therapeutic that could be potentially viable for people with CF, but also, again, to, shed light on how I, as a patient, could access something like this, and how I think it's important for, this might not be applicable to everybody, right, in this same scenario, but how important it is for us to be strong advocates for ourselves and be involved in our care in every aspect of that. And so anyway, after this experience, as I said, AMR, which is antibiotic resistance, this kind of tied really closely to that. And I started becoming more and more of an advocate in the AMR space, because this phage therapy is an alternative to antibiotic. And I had been up until that point really struggling with these lung infections that were becoming more and more resistant to antibiotics. And that's why I actually tried that phage therapy as an alternative. And so because of this experience with phage and kind of sharing my story more publicly about that experience and talking about the reason why I tried it is because I was dealing with antibiotic resistance. So then I started to just get more inquiries from, quote, different people that were writing stories within Nature or New Statesman. You see some examples here. I was reached out to get quotes to be in these various news articles. I was also asked to contribute on a number of panels for various conferences, like the Sepsis Alliance. For one, they had a conference on, it's called Therapeutic Innovation and the Challenges in Fighting Antimicrobial Resistance. A couple of other legislative type organizations and initiatives that I was sharing my patient journey and my patient story on. And then a couple of documentaries as well. Over the time, I've been asked to, share my journey and share my experience to really bring awareness to the problem of antibiotic resistance, which really is a global threat. But so then after that, so this was, into early 2020, and that's when kind of COVID hit, and that was right kind of when I was starting on this path of speaking more at conferences and sharing my journey more publicly, being inquired to share my journey and kind of be involved in these various advocacy capacities. But everything kind of came to a little bit of a halt during the start of COVID. And that's when I was like, okay, well, I have a lot of these various experiences where, I've shared my story, I've worked with companies to some degree, I've created patient-facing materials, all of these things. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to, I wouldn't say I did any consulting work up until that point, but I did create a website for myself. And I put all of these various written materials that I've created, kind of some of these interviews that I had done, podcasts I'd been on, a few of these speaking opportunities that I'd had. I put all these on a website, and from there, did a lot of just networking on LinkedIn. And I think Taylor is going to talk a little bit more about this as well from her perspective. But, just started to reach out to different companies, really just through LinkedIn, through website, their website that I found on, like email addresses that I found on their websites, and kind of taking the route of, okay, I'm this patient that has this lived experience. These are the various things that I've been involved in. I have experience in the clinical space, clinical trial space, science space. So that's kind of where I want to provide input and be a part of and work on, what projects I kind of want to work on. And so through a lot of these connections and these, opportunities that I gotten, it slowly started to snowball from there. And I connected with a couple of other well-established advocates who I was like, what, I want advice. Like, what have you, how have you done it? Or what opportunities or projects are you working on? And, what connections do you have? And so just kind of being in that way candid about what I want to achieve and where I see, what I see the future becoming and what I want to do and the passion that I do have, being transparent about that and just saying, hey, if there are opportunities, keep me in mind. And so I started with a couple of these companies here. You can see that I've worked with in various capacities. So, some also started out like Rare Patient Voice. That, for example, that's just, and Health Union too. So they have like a patient leader platform. So I joined that, and through there were some opportunities to be involved with, more of a patient community as well. Rare Patient Voices opportunities to do more like market research. So that's kind of like sometimes they have panel opportunities, more like focus group type of work. And same thing with SysScripts, that's very similar to that. And then I became part of a couple of advisory boards, one being metadata, another one with pharmaceutical company like Genentech, and then participating in a lot of just like webinar conversations too. Like I've done a lot of like moderation and things like that. So that kind of leads me to, what are some of these opportunities and what these look like. So hopefully, so far, the journey that I've described, can give you an idea of how I came to do what I do now. It's been really, I guess, really an evolution over time. But so now I do a lot of these patient advisory boards and councils. As I said, there was a number of cystic fibrosis nonprofits that I've worked with in the past. And more broadly too, I don't just work now in the CF space, but in overall within the clinical trial space, I'm just like a patient voice amongst many others, and it can be applied, our experiences can be applied more broadly than just to our specific disease. So within some nonprofits, I've worked in some in the rare disease space, and like our Odyssey too, for young adults. And I think that that's really important to share our journeys to, empower other people and inspire other people to do the same for themselves. And then of course these like research committees and grant reviews, most of that has been within the cystic fibrosis space, but also recently, for example, I've been selected to be on the Patient-Reported Outcomes Research Institute, so PCORI's rare disease panels. And so this is an organization that actually provides funding to various research opportunities, centering around patient involvement in research. And I've done with my provider as well, with my doctor's office, a number of with my doctor, my cystic fibrosis physician, done some like manuscript collaboration as well. So this is helping or together writing, journal articles for about cystic fibrosis, about living with the condition, various aspects of that. So that I've done a little bit less focused in that, but over time, that's kind of a few things that have come about as well. So really, the point here that I wanted to say is like, there is a lot of value that we have in just our lived experience and what we, how we have received care and the opportunities and the gaps in care. And like, there's a lot of knowledge to be gained here for companies to understand better and for them to make their products and their services better for us, as a disease population. And so I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind is that, although we may not have, like, I've not worked in industry directly, right? I've not worked in a pharmaceutical company. I'm not a physician, I'm only a person that has a undergrad degree in biology. And so, that's part of what has been difficult over this time is being like, okay, well, I'm not a professional in this. How am I going to present myself as one? But it takes time to understand this space more. And as we gain more of this understanding, our confidence and our experiences expand. And there's more and more opportunities that we feel comfortable in being a part of and then taking on. So with that, this is my last slide here, but I guess this is not sure why I included this, but it's just kind of like back to the whole, like, everything, all the opportunities that I've been involved and a part of, it's like moving, I want to keep growing that and expanding it. And I think like the world is our, I really have that mentality that like the world is our oyster. And, I think that like we can, within obviously within our limitations, and I've talked about, that those are substantial for my life. However, within the realm of possibility of what I can feasibly do, I want to make the most of all of that. And so that means, grasping a lot of opportunities, as many as that come to me. Sometimes, of course, have to say no to things, and when our health is not well, and when we have other obstacles, sometimes we have to turn these things down, and we have to take time to slow down and reset and focus on our health and all of that. But that's just kind of the perspective that I have that keeps me moving forward and keeps me expanding these horizons and seeing what can what the future can hold as well. So I'll stop there, and I'll let Taylor share a little bit more as well.
Thanks so much, Ella. That was amazing. And I'm so glad that we've been connected over the years, just to be able to, go back and forth and give each other advice and update each other on what we're doing in our different careers in the rare disease space and learn from each other and things like that. So thanks for passing it over to me. Let's see if okay, great. Firstly, I want to mention, as Ella said, I've been doing some traveling this year. Right now I'm in Prague, so it's actually 12:30 a.m. for me. So if I look tired, that's why, but I'm okay. And I'm here and I'm doing good. So I'm going to be speaking similarly to Ella, where I'm going to be talking first about my story and what brought me into the rare disease community, how I started volunteering, and then how I started transitioning that into a career. So from volunteer to career, how I made rare disease advocacy my job. So starting off, I'll tell you a background, how I got into the rare disease community. My dad was diagnosed with a rare X-linked genetic condition called adrenoleukodystrophy, or ALD for short. This is when I was 3 years old. And at the time of his diagnosis, we were told two main things. One, that there was no treatment, no cure, so that my dad would pass away. And two, that ALD was an X-linked genetic condition, which meant that biological males were patients of X-linked conditions and biological females were carriers. And since my father had a mutation that caused his X-linked disease on his X chromosome, he passed that down to me as his daughter. So we found out that I was an obligate carrier of the condition, but at the time, my family was told that carriers were asymptomatic, that there was nothing really for me to worry about until I eventually went on to have children, that they would have a 50% chance of inheriting ALD. As I'll talk about a little bit more later, but in the last 20-something years, a lot has changed. And we now know that 90 to 100% of women with an ALD mutation do develop symptoms of the condition, and that we're not just carriers. However, back to my family story. So my dad, over the next 2 years, ALD is a neurological disease. So he basically lost all functions, walking, talking, swallowing, and he went into a vegetative state and passed away when I was in kindergarten. However, my mom felt that growing up, it was really important for me to be connected with the ALD community, since now I was the only person in my direct family who had this mutation now that my dad had passed away. So my mom started bringing me to ALD Connect conferences, and I was able to see, other people with ALD, other women who were carriers. And this is when it first started putting the pieces together, that females were not just carriers, because I could see women with wheelchairs, walkers. So clearly I started realizing there was something going on. I also felt empowered at that time to want to share my dad's story. So I started writing. In elementary school, I had a teacher help me submit my story to a local magazine. And then a couple years later, I started getting more involved in legislative advocacy when an ALD newborn screening test was developed. That was back in 2011. And advocated at my state level and wrote to my state senator to get a bill introduced to add ALD to New Jersey's newborn screening panel. And through this, I feel like everything just sort of kind of snowballed. So when I was a teenager, I wanted to meet other teenagers who were carriers of ALD because there wasn't that many of us. And this is mostly because most female carriers inherit it from their mother rather than their father, because about most males have ALD in childhood, so they typically don't live on to go on to have children. So it was hard finding other teenagers, but nonetheless, what I did was I turned to Facebook and I started a Facebook group because being a Generation Z, that was what just came naturally to me, going on Facebook and trying to find people that way. And I don't even really know how it happened, but I just slowly started getting connected with people in the rare disease community. I didn't even know that the rare disease community was a thing. I didn't even really know that there was other rare diseases. Like, I always knew that ALD was rare, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know that there was a community of 350 million people around the world who were impacted by another rare disease. I also learned that there was a lot of other X-linked genetic conditions, a few hundred in fact, where females were facing similar challenges, where they were long thought to be just carriers, and they were actually affected by symptoms, also had difficulty with accessing family planning options because they can be really expensive, especially in the US, and often aren't covered by insurance. And also just the psychological impacts, whether that be guilt, grief, or in my situation, fear and uncertainty of what the future will look like and not knowing if and when I'll develop symptoms. So from this, I founded Remember the Girls, which is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to supporting and advocating for female carriers of all X-linked conditions. And so this was really, I think, when my advocacy started getting more serious. At the time, I probably wouldn't have even called it advocacy, because I think when you start doing it, you don't even realize until you're kind of into it that you're doing advocacy, because it almost just comes natural to you, especially those of you who are here watching this, being involved in our Odyssey. I'm sure these things kind of come natural to you, and you only later realize that you're an advocate. And that was definitely my situation. So to talk a little bit more about Remember the Girls, as I mentioned, this is the nonprofit that I founded back in 2017. It was my freshman year of college. I had no background, obviously, of nonprofits. My mom and dad had started one right after my dad was diagnosed, so I knew a little bit about the basics, but everything else was sort of like a learning curve, developing a board, writing bylaws, developing programs. And it really just has been this learning curve over the last 6 years. And I continue to run Remember the Girls to this day, in addition to my career in the rare disease space. But I honestly attribute a lot of the skills that I use to market myself today as a rare disease consultant. I learned them through building Remember the Girls at a grassroots level. So I feel like so much of it really comes back to that. And that's why I think it's really important to, have, I guess, this phase where you're really volunteer heavy. And then from that, you take those skills you learned in your volunteer work and are able to apply them to paid advocacy positions. So as I said, I started connecting with the broader rare disease community, attending loads of events, being invited as a public speaker. I'm starting to be paid once in a while, not very often, but once in a while, starting to be paid for public speaking. I also am the co-founder of YAR, which you may have heard of, part of the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. And, I really started not just focusing on my X-linked community or ALD, but the rare disease community as a whole, especially when it comes to young adult advocacy, engaging the younger generation, using social media as a tool to engage the patient community. And I was doing this, sorry, I'm going to go back. I was doing this both in person and online. If you ask a lot of people in the rare disease community, they would probably know that I was so active on Twitter. I was always contributing to all the rare disease conversations. There would be these weekly patient chats that some companies and organizations would run, where they would ask questions and then you responded an answer. I would always engaging in those, because I felt that that was the way that I was really growing my network of rare disease advocates, physicians, people in the pharma industry. And I was also connecting to some people in the pharma industry through Remember the Girls and their sponsors as well. But I was really doing this more not because I was trying to build a career in the background, more just because it felt natural to me, and it felt so amazing to be an advocate and to have this outlet to do something positive and also meet hundreds of other people who were doing the same thing. It was just such an empowering feeling. And I feel like I was almost addicted to it in a way. So I worked a lot on building my brand as an advocate on social media. As I said, I would provide thought leadership on a lot of different topics. I would also write articles on my website or contribute to different publications about a variety of different topics, like family planning, for example. I would also always post about my own advocacy work. So anytime I had a speaking engagement or even attended an event, I would always post about it. And honestly, even if it was something like small, like a small online event with 10 people, I would just, no one has to know that it was a small online event about 10 people. Like, don't say it's a massive event, but, sort of fake it till you make it of like, oh, I'm out here doing all these big speaking things because, well, you get what I'm saying. I feel like through this, I also started establishing my niches in the sense of what I knew a lot about. For example, family planning for genetic carriers is something I know a lot about, not from a genetic standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. Also young adult advocacy. So I was establishing what I know a lot about and what I'm good at. And then of course, just networking with others. Ella and I don't even remember where we first met, but we've been on a few speaking things together over the years. And it's like, you just meet these people who are, have a passion for the same thing you do. And it's like, just great to have these ongoing relationships that you can both support each other. So shout out. So I would say this started towards the end of college. I studied politics. So, I had always thought that I would go into a career in politics or something along those lines. But in like the last 2 years of college, I started realizing that there could be a way for me to work in the rare disease space too. And I would have never thought that that was possible because I thought you had to be like in pharmaceuticals or a physician or a researcher. Like, I did not think that there was a space professionally to work and make money as an advocate. And like someone that doesn't have some fancy degree, but just has this expertise through lived experience. However, I realized that there was people in my network who were doing this, and they were working, whether they were working for a company as an employee or a consultant, they were using their lived experience as both a rare disease community member and as an advocate to bring skills to these companies that they weren't able to find anywhere else. So I realized that I was a subject matter expert because of all the years that I spent in the rare disease community and learning how to engage with the community effectively by being part of it. And I understood that a lot of companies, especially in the last decade, when there's become much more of a focus on patient centricity, were really looking for these subject matter experts to basically help them and tell them, what to do in terms of engaging with the communities that they were trying to reach. Because to be honest, who better to give them guidance on how to engage with the rare disease community than someone who has been in the community for all these years and knows it so well. I also accepted that I was well suited to do this and that I was done mostly working for free. Of course, there's always going to be things that we do for volunteer. Like, Remember the Girls, I run that volunteer, and I still do a lot of speaking things volunteer and, a lot of things volunteer. But I realized that over the years, there had been things that I had done here and there for companies where they would, want to have a call with me to pick my brain about something, and something that didn't necessarily benefit me, it only benefited them. And now that I was graduating, I had to be more picky, and I couldn't say yes to everything because I needed to get a job and I needed to make money. So, I kind of had to come to the terms with like, I'm going to have to say no to some things, and I'm going to have to focus on how I can turn this into a career and make money, because at that point I was like 20 years old, and obviously I had to, start making money, start paying off my student loans. So I really committed myself to figuring out how to do that. So after I graduated college, that was during the start of COVID, it was in 2020. And at the start of the following year, I had the opportunity to work with a company called All Stripes, which you may have heard of. So basically, I first connected with them a few years prior when they were looking for someone to do social media part-time. They ended up going with someone else. But now that I had made that connection, like 2 years later, the same woman that I interviewed with came back to me and she was like, we're looking for someone part-time again to do social media. Like, would you like to? So I started doing that and quickly was offered a full-time role. And at the time, I didn't have like a ton of time, I guess, to sort of think like, do I want to start working for a company? Like, do I want to try off the bat to be a consultant? But looking back, I was at the company for 3 years in total, like a little over 2 years as an employee. I'm so glad that I did have the years of experience that I've had at All Stripes. They aren't a pharmaceutical company. They've now been acquired, but they were a rare disease technology company. So basically, they would serve the patient community by signing them up for research programs. I won't go into all this, but basically the point that I wanted to share is I worked full-time for All Stripes for about 2 years on the marketing team, focusing on social media and patient engagement. And I'm so glad that now I've been able to add that to my skill set as well and show that I have worked not in the pharmaceutical industry, but in the rare disease space on a professional level. And so in March, I decided to take a risk and leave my full-time position at All Stripes and begin doing consulting full-time. And thankfully, I was able to continue consulting with All Stripes before they got acquired. But I was ready to really jump into this. And I wanted to work with multiple different companies. And I wanted to see what I could do to serve the patient community through consulting. So I worked on updating my website. I already had an LLC formed for a couple of years, which is pretty easy to do. You just do it on like your state's website and you have to pay, I think it's a couple $100. So it's not cheap, but I had set that up as a way to put my money through when I was being paid occasionally through speaking engagements. So it would just be easier for my taxes, whatever. But I already had an LLC. And so I really started focusing on my consulting services. Like, I can talk a lot of talk, but can I walk the walk? Like, what can I actually offer to these companies that they're going to want to pay me for, and that is also going to benefit them and also benefit the patient community in turn? So I know it's small. You can't really see it that well here. If you go on my website, taylorkane.com, you can see better. But basically, I came up with a list of my offerings. And this is honestly always evolving. This took me a long time to get to because it was really hard to like explain and define what I could do, especially as someone who was now sort of starting out. This was probably my biggest challenge. But I think it's really important. And it comes back to what I was saying about, knowing your niches and what you are good at. So let me talk about that a little bit more and talk about really the first steps to take. Like, this is exactly what I did. And I'm going to tell you, that this has worked for me. And now I'm in a pretty good place compared to when I started this back in March, doing it full time. And I had a really exciting call today with another company. So it's just an exciting time to share. But this is exactly what I did. So first, and Ella said she did the same thing. So looking on like LinkedIn and finding the people that are in your rare disease network and seeing who is working as a patient advocate or a patient engagement person in the rare disease industry and asking them if you can set up a call with them. That's exactly what I did. I literally made a list of like 20 people. Ella was one of them, who I was like, I need to talk to them because I want them to know that I'm joining this space so that I can be on their radar. Maybe there's an opportunity that they've heard of or has come to them that they're not a good fit for, that they can't take on, and then they know that I could potentially be a good fit for. 2, I wanted to learn all the different types of work that patient engagement consultants in particular, or people doing consulting in the space, were working on. Were they being on advisory boards? Were they working on short-term projects? Were they working on more longer term things? Like, I really wanted to know, what does it actually look like on a day-to-day basis to be a consultant in the rare disease space? So yeah, contact these people, see how they got to where they are, see what advice they have for you. I think I found that people were so receptive and willing to help. And I think, I didn't find that there was any sort of competitiveness, because there is so much need for people who are subject matter experts to help the pharmaceutical and the rare disease industry. Like, there is really, I feel like, so much that everyone was just super helpful. So third, I would start on LinkedIn connecting with people in patient advocacy at different rare disease companies. Like, for example, you can look up some of the main pharma companies, like, I don't know, Ultragenics, for example, and like see who's on their patient advocacy team. You can send them a request, send a personalized note, but just start making some of those connections in patient advocacy in particular. Also, at the same time, and this is the one that I said I struggled with the most, is defining your skill set. Also, if you don't have one, make a resume, a LinkedIn page, a website. I don't think all of these are necessary, but you're definitely going to want something that's able to showcase your advocacy work that you've done. And by work, I mean volunteer work, or anything that you've done, speaking engagements, volunteering, writing. Like, on both of our websites, we just sort of have accumulation of everything that we've done related to rare disease advocacy, like a big portfolio. And there's a lot of places, as you all probably know, like Wix, like easy places to build a website. But again, you don't need a website. I'm just saying that having somewhere to showcase yourself as an advocate is really important. And as far as defining your skill set, honestly, this came about through my many conversations, but also, to be honest, looking at the way other people who are working in this space defined their skills. Like, I looked at them and then thought, does this apply to me? Or like, even getting sort of like buzzwords, like I knew my niches, but I'm like, how do I word this so it sounds right? Like, I was just getting a lot of other inspiration from other people working in the space, and was able to just apply that to myself and change it to fit me. But that was really helpful. Like, this doesn't exist in a silo. Like, you should definitely look to others for inspiration. So the next step would be making a list of companies in the rare disease space. This can be pharma, biotech, genetic testing, CROs, technology companies. Again, LinkedIn is a really good place for this. Also, you can look at your favorite rare disease nonprofits and see what companies sponsor them, sponsor their projects, their programs. It's a really good place to start. And 6, honestly, just start pitching. Like, the amount of outreach that I've done over like the last 6 or 7 months to so many companies, like, you just have to, like, it's not just going to come to you. It might in the future, but only after you first make that connection, and have a conversation about your skills and what you do as a consultant or an employee, or however you want to work in this space. And even if a company doesn't necessarily have a need for what you offer right now, that doesn't mean that they won't in the future. So I had a lot of conversations, and I mean, like 90% of them went nowhere. They were a great conversation, but there wasn't a need in the present moment. And rather than letting that discourage me, I know now that that person knows my skills. They know where to find me. So if something comes up, the potential is still there. And in terms of the pitch, it's definitely best if you have a connection, like on LinkedIn. For example, how you can see, say you're looking at someone on the patient advocacy team at a company, you can see if you have mutual connections, and it's great to have that mutual connection introduce you if possible, especially if it's someone that decently well and can, would be able to vouch for you if need be. But whether you have that or not, honestly, just what I do is I don't make it super long, but introduce myself, describe my skills, which I've talked about a lot, sort of your list of skills, and also like apply them to the company, like, tailor it a little bit, of course, and also some ideas. So rather than just saying like, hey, I'm a consultant, like, can I work for you? Say, oh, I would be interested in, discussing your social media strategy and seeing, because something that I offer is developing social media strategies for how to effectively engage with patients in the rare disease community. I really think you need to like give them a little taste, a little idea, because otherwise they're going to be like, well, why would we need you? Like, why, what are you consulting for? Like, you really need to sort of give them a little brief on what you offer, and then ask to schedule a call. And honestly, like, it is not easy. I'm going to say that, like, because this is not like a defined career path, that you follow this, and this. It's really like you have to have a lot of grit, I guess. You have to like know that you'll have a lot of conversations that feel like they'll go nowhere, but you have to remember that there are not many people in the world that have the skills that we do. Like, there's something so uniquely special about being a subject matter expert in the rare disease community or a chronic disease community or whatever community that you're a part of that makes the skills that you have extremely valuable. So don't discount that. And definitely remember to lean on your community, lean on the people that, that are in this space trying to do the same thing. And yeah, I know that was a lot, and if you have any questions, I think that's my last slide. So, we have a full another hour. And so, of course, we're both willing to take any and all questions. So thank you.
Yeah, if there are any questions, we definitely want to hear them and we want to answer them. So don't hesitate and don't be shy. Yeah, Taylor, so I was nodding there at the end because, all of those points that you were talking about, I was like jotting notes to make me think about what I was going to say afterward. Like, I definitely agree, with having that defining really like what our skill set is really important. And I do think that this, it does take time to develop that, and that's something that I think both of us probably are still working to develop, as you said. Like, as we get involved in different projects, expand our skill set and our understanding of the rare disease space, of the pharmaceutical industry as a whole, we can then, leverage that and move it or incorporate that knowledge into other projects and other things that we're a part of. So, for those that are watching, don't feel discouraged on, okay, well, if you don't know what your expertise is or what your skill set is, it's going to take time to develop as you are, a part of more of these projects and understand more about the industry. So I think we have a question. What has been the most difficult part about building a career in this space, in the rare disease space? Taylor, do you want to answer it first?
Yeah, I can answer first. And this reminds me about another point that I wanted to make that I missed. The most difficult part for me thus far has been just the inconsistency in terms of income. Being a consultant, especially, or someone who is like self-employed, a contractor, not working as an employee, it means that you could be on short-term projects that could even last a couple weeks. You could be on some more long-term contract. Like, one contract I am on right now is a year, which is amazing because now I have a consistent. It's also a retainer, which means that I'm paid the same amount every month for an estimated number of hours a month. And like, I wanted this so badly because I really needed to get a consistent income. Even though it's part-time, it's only 12 hours a month, like having something that is consistent has been great, but I only started that one a couple of weeks ago. So I would say that that's a big challenge. Like, some of my months I made so little money and some of my months were decent, and like that up and down has been hard. But the reason that I felt secure doing it now is because I am not renting a place. Like, I was in a financial position where I'm like, this is a good time for me to try, because I was worried that when I got older and that, if I had a mortgage or something, that it might be harder to like take a step back and like have this financial insecurity. So I felt that this was a good time. But I would say that that's been the hardest part. It's also been a little stressful, scary. Like, thankfully, I had savings and and stuff. But yeah, that's been the biggest challenge. But like I've really turned a corner, and I feel like that I've had the few months of stress, and now I really feel like everything's starting to pay off.
I definitely agree with that. Certainly. In addition, I would say, and kind of in conjunction with that, is kind of navigating those conversations with new potential collaborators or clients, or people that, or companies that you want to work with, and kind of, and the difficulty in like approaching, like how, like it's important, and I think it's important to think about too, like don't over engineer what you're going to say, or kind of like the skill set, or what you offer to them, what kind of packaging your expertise in a concise way and delivering that definitely takes some skill in practice, in building, in just, yeah, and practicing how you deliver that to people to sound like what you're offering or what you're doing actually has value.
Yeah,
And
I
so
had
that has
that
been,
imposter syndrome. Like,
yeah, right. And so that has been challenging. So I think, one of the more difficult parts for me personally, and how to approach that. And, and then of course, like, oftentimes a lot of those connections and those conversations don't lead to anything, because maybe they don't have a need, or they haven't like built out their advocacy branch enough to incorporate a consultant or somebody that can help them. So it's again, that kind of goes into what you were saying too, but that's probably been the most difficult
I
part.
face that a lot too. The advocacy part, like not being built out enough. Like sort of feel like the sweet spot is where they have like existing like patient advocacy initiatives, but they want to improve on those, and they feel like they need better expertise too. But I've had instances with a few companies where they didn't have anything, and so like they felt like, yeah, like they weren't ready to take that step, or if they did, they would want to hire someone internally,
Right.
to build this from the ground up. And like they weren't looking for strategy advice, like they were looking for someone to literally build something. So yeah, I totally agree with that. The elevator pitch, that's been challenging, but also the shifting on the fly, because I'm like, you have to sort of adjust based on what they're going to say, because like I feel like going into these conversations, they're sort of set up as not like, we are going to discuss to see if you're the right fit for a consultant. It's like, oh, can we schedule a call to like catch up and see where our goals align? Like it's a very like general, like, so you don't go into it knowing how the conversation is really going to go. So you like kind of have to like, I honestly feel like it's taught me to be less anxious before calls, because I'm like, I can't predict what's going to happen. So just don't even try. Like I'm prepared. That's all I can do. Like you just have to like go in and like fake it till you make it. Like, the imposter syndrome is so real. I think a lot of young adults face that. But you know what you're talking about. Like, it because you've lived it. So I think that's what makes us in such a unique position, is like we've learned these skills through living them. And like it's not like we've gone to school and taken a class and this and that. Like it's a totally different sort of subject matter expertise that we have, that I think is so unique to patient advocates in particular, which is really cool about it. So I think that's one way that helps me before calls, like not getting too stressed beforehand.
That's good advice, certainly.
Okay, we have another question.
Yeah, I was just going to read it off. What is the one moment that made you realize advocacy was the perfect career for you? It's a good question. I like that. Yeah. Do you have something? If not,
No, you.
Okay. So I think I have a couple, but there was, I'd say that, so in 2020, so this was after I received that phage therapy, that summer or two, I was getting more involved in advocating in the antibiotic resistant space, advocating more about phage therapy as a viable treatment option, kind of being invited to these conversations and panels. And for Rare Disease Day, in 2020 was invited for the FDA's Rare Disease Day to talk about individualized therapies. So these were like experimental, therapies that are used in rare disease for, treating either like, N of one. So one patient, that's like a tailored treatment, or, phage therapy falls under that bucket as well, under what's called like expanded access. And so I was invited to speak on a panel with, a physician. I mean, it was at the FDA for Rare Disease Day. I mean, it was like, obviously it's like a huge event, and, many people attend, and just a really, really cool experience, honestly, to be a part of that. And so I'd say that was, in my mind, one of the defining moments of, okay, this is something I really have such a passion for. Clearly, I'm, my experience and I have a lot of value in this space too, if I'm being invited to do something like this. So that means that I should continue this. It means I have a calling for this. And, it really solidified the, that piece of, okay, this is something I can do, and this is something I really, really want to do. And I want to be able to take this even further and, have more of an impact. And so I'd say that's probably one of the moments that stand out to me the most. And that was quite early on in this journey.
I love that. I would say for me, it was probably around the same time, like 2019, when I sort of had that light bulb moment of like, this could be a career. Like I said, I didn't know that I would ever be able to work in this. I thought if I was working in rare disease, that it would be eventually running my nonprofit, like on a paid level. I thought that was the only way that I could be continuing my advocacy and making money from it and, sustaining living. But when I realized that there was rare disease patient advocates who were consulting for multiple companies and making a full-time income that way, in that moment, once I realized that, I knew that I could not see myself doing anything else. Like, I studied politics, as I said, but like when I made that realization, I knew that I couldn't do anything else. Like it like Ella, you said, your calling. Like I feel like, not to be all like corny and like not that, but I really feel like, I don't think everything has a reason, but I do think that I was put on this earth for something. And I think that this is it. I really do. And I think that both my volunteer work and advocacy, and also my professional advocacy and my paid work, I think like my life's mission is to serve the rare disease community. And I want to do that in every way possible, both through volunteer and paid, like any way that I can. And I can literally not even fathom what I would be doing if it wasn't rare disease. Like I honestly cannot fathom being in something else. Like I don't know. I cannot imagine it. So I think, just from that moment, I knew I had to make it work. And I knew that it was going to be hard, because I knew that it wasn't a clearly defined path. And it wasn't like you just, get a job you just get a 9-to-5 at, a company and then climb up the corporate ladder. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but like, I knew that I had to try. And that was really corny. I'm sorry, but like, that is actually how I feel.
Well, no, I think that's awesome. And I think that kind of like, there's a point in there that I wanted to comment on too. It's like, you didn't know, what it would, you didn't know what it would look like, right? You thought, okay, maybe I'd be running you'd be running your nonprofit, and you'd be kind of, successful with that and growing that to be a bigger business, or, kind of that could lead to more opportunities. But now you've kind of taken a different path, right? Now you've worked at All Stripes, and now you're an independent. And like, I think that's what's interesting, is that things evolve, like as we, depending on like the different connections we make, the different people we come in contact with, we don't know, like, this is the path that we want to take, right? Like, our passion is what fuels us. So it's like the advocacy and like the passion for being an advocate is what drives us to take on more opportunities, take on these challenges, connect with these companies, connect with other patients, and really, and continue driving this, right, to bring patient centricity throughout drug development and into improving healthcare as a whole. but we don't know what we're going to end up doing in the future. I think, and that's what's scary, but also really cool at the same time. I think that's, who knows? Maybe we will be working within a company at some point, or maybe you will be developing your nonprofit more. Maybe there will be research advancements within ALD that are gonna make you kind of shift focus more toward back into that space. Not. So it's just like, yeah, I think we don't know what that future holds, but I think it's scary, but it's also really exciting and thrilling at the same time.
Yeah, maybe we'll start a company someday.
Hey, it's not out of the realm of possibility. What is something that you tell your younger self, knowing what you know now? That is a good one.
So
Go ahead.
the first thing that comes to my mind is to not let myself be taken advantage of. I feel like I have been in situations, especially speaking situations, where, for example, that I was probably the only unpaid speaker because I didn't ask for it. I didn't even know when I first started speaking. And I want to preface this, like, speaking things, there's such a range of like to unpaid, slightly paid, like it's such a range, but I didn't even realize that any of the ones that I were doing, not for nonprofits, but like for companies or organizations that had a lot of money, that like people were even paid for that. Like, again, it wasn't until I learned it where I was like, hey, maybe I should be paid for that. But I was so afraid to ask because I was like, I'm just a young teenage girl. Like, why would I deserve to get paid? Like, I had such, at first, being like, I'm way too scared because then what if they take it away from me? What if they say we don't want you at all? First of all, that will never happen. If anything, they just say we don't have the budget, and then you can decide if you want to do it for free. I would tell myself to start asking for payment earlier because my time is valuable, and if other speakers are being paid, then I deserve to be paid too. 100%, I would tell myself that. And again, there'll always be things that I will do for free, always, especially when it's, things with X-linked disease organizations, organizations in the rare disease space, like there's always going to be things that I do for free, especially for my friends and colleagues that I've made in this community. But when it comes to companies that have a lot of money and that are paying other speakers a lot of money, you should be asking to be paid for sure, 100%. So I would tell myself that, and I would probably be a little bit richer right now.
Hey, that's okay. It's a learning process. It's a growth process, and we learn this along the way. But that is a great one. I'd certainly agree with that. I'd say in maybe more general advocacy terms, I'll take that route on this answer. I'd say it's just to be more bold, and maybe that kind of ties into asking for your worth, asking money for being compensation. I think it encompasses also being bold in knowing, as I kind of said in my presentation too, like knowing our value as people that live with conditions or are caregivers or advocates for conditions, know others with the conditions that, we have this unique skill set, unique experience that has value. And knowing that helps us to be more confident when we are, talking with companies, when we are even talking with our doctors and our providers, when we're talking to the insurance company and fighting for medication that we need. It helps us to have this position where we know what our experiences have value, and that correlates and relates to all areas of healthcare as a whole. And so that's really what I would tell myself, starting out younger is, don't be afraid to share my story. People want to hear it. People want to relate to you. Don't be afraid to email somebody or message somebody on LinkedIn and tell them who you are and ask them for advice, or don't be afraid to ask more, within reason, ask money for what you're worth or for what you what. Don't have those second guesses. Don't second guess yourself. Just go for it. Be bold. So that's what I'd say.
Totally agree.
If we have, everybody that's listening, definitely bring your questions on. Okay, we have another one too. What are some of the challenges of balancing different responsibilities as a consultant, or balancing work with nonprofit and as a consultant?
I would say that time management is the biggest thing. This goes for, honestly, anytime when you say have multiple part-time jobs or full-time jobs, anytime that you are divided between things, time management is big. And also knowing when you're wearing what hat, like, especially since I have a nonprofit and work in this space, like, I need to make it very clear when I'm showing up as Taylor Kane versus when I'm showing up as Taylor Kane, the founder of Remember the Girls. Those are two different people. I mean, like, obviously they overlap, but like, I need to make it clear, when I'm there as myself and not as a representative of my organization. Other than that, honestly, this is just going to be basic, like, productivity tips, but Google Calendar, I time, what is it called? Like, time bank or whatever. So I'll like put 3 hours in for working on this project with this company, 2 hours doing nonprofit stuff. Like, I have to do that. Otherwise, I'll find that I'll spend all day, say, doing stuff for my nonprofit. Like, I need to do that for myself. Obviously, everyone has a different work ethic, but I find that just before going into the next day, knowing what project or what work I'm working on when is just been so helpful for me, especially in the past couple of months when my workload has increased. That's it.
I'd say I definitely couldn't agree with more with all of those points. Those are great suggestions too, with like, time management, Google Calendar, and all that. I think this may be talking about some challenges, not necessarily with the responsibilities, but just the challenges of consulting too. I think at some point too, and I think in the more recent past, I've kind of come to this a little bit where I've experienced some levels of burnout where, it's like, I feel sometimes we can get wrapped up in just like, okay, I have to get this deliverable out. I have to write this thing and I do this. And it can be overwhelming. And then and sometimes I've kind of felt like I'm in this like hamster wheel where I'm also like, kind of have been a little bit removed from, or the work that I've done, some of the work that I've kind of been a part of and taking on has been a little bit removed from this focus of, the purpose of patient engagement and bringing the patient voice into drug development and into, patient-facing materials or whatever it is. And, sometimes I've like in some of these being transparent, like some of these like panel conversations that I've been a part of recently as part of these conferences, where it's just kind of the same conversations over and over with the same kind of industry people. And I'm not really sure what the real value is to patients. So I've kind of found that some of this work is a little bit detached from my purpose and my mission and my, the value that I see in bringing the patient voice into this, into this space. And that's made me feel a little bit, less enthusiastic about what I'm doing, and I put less effort and focus into it. And so that, and by doing that, I think some of maybe a little bit of the quality of when it comes out may be a little bit lacking too. And so I've noticed that recently, and then I think it's really important to refocus and say, okay, what are the things that really are moving me toward continuing on my path of my focus and where I want to, have more involvement in, or where I think my work is actually making an impact, versus, some of these things that are just kind of like, oh, I'm just doing them because I want to, just feel like I want to be productive or want to stay relevant and all that, which is important to you. But I think that's been a little bit of a challenge for me more recently, and how I'm trying to balance, what I want to take on, and making sure that focus is still there, that I don't just get like caught up on, oh, I'm on this panel and I'm doing this thing, but, really the why is still at the root of my work. So, that's something that I think happens as you just the longer we're in this space, because sometimes, and as you probably know too, like sometimes these companies like, oh, they see patient involvement and patient engagement as that box checking exercise where it's like, okay, yeah, we include patients and yada yada, and all these conversations are talking about it, but nothing's actually truly being done behind the scenes. So that's kind of what has led to some of these kind of like these feelings a little bit. But anyway.
Yeah, that can be really hard, like when, like you're sort of like the token, like patient voice that they're integrating once. Like I've definitely had similar experiences like that. And I think, it's just important to remember your personal mission, like how nonprofits have a mission. I think, having like your personal mission and what you want to achieve as a consultant. And also remember too, that you also have to just consider the income too. Like, I think that's a really big part of it. Like, obviously you have to balance the wanting to only do things that 100% serve your personal mission, but also make enough money to live and get by. So I think that is another challenge. And I have had to navigate that a little bit, because some of my conversations that I've had with a few companies that have sort of continued, I don't really feel like that passionate about like the way the conversation is going, but it's been hard because I'm like, well, I have still availability. Like I should probably just try to turn this into something. But I've been trying to just remind myself, like, don't jump into something just because it's there. Like, but it's obviously easier said than done. And, I'm lucky that I don't have like an apartment bill to pay right now. I will next year. But yeah, I think it's just trying to figure out that balance too. And it can be, like it is challenging. I think any self-employed person faces that struggle of the ups and the downs, especially in income. Just, trying to stay as true.
Yeah, I think that's
yourself.
Absolutely. What is the most amazing experience that you've had as an advocate? A moment when you were certain the investment in the career was worth it. I think it's kind of similar to the, what moment made me realize that advocacy was the perfect career for you. But maybe now this is talking more, most amazing experience as an advocate and how the investment was worth it. Other than that experience that I describe before with the FDA, I would say that last year, actually, it's probably one of the most more recent amazing experiences. I was invited to speak in California and San Francisco for Genentech, for an event for Genentech. And so they develop a drug for cystic fibrosis that I've been on since I was a really little kid. And this was a sunsetting event for one of their manufacturing facilities that manufactured this particular drug that I'm on. And they were going to be closing that plant, and then moving, operations elsewhere. But it was kind of like a finale event for, the closing of this plant, and kind of like a celebration at the same time. And so I was invited to share my journey of, cystic fibrosis, and, what my kind of sort of along the lines of, the journey that I described here on this presentation. And it was for everybody that worked in this plant. So it was like over 1,000 people, and it was just a really, really neat celebration. And it was just a very, very memorable experience. And I'd say that it was one of the highlights of being, an advocate, of being a consultant, kind of all wrapped into one, of course. But really, this was really just me as a patient sharing my story. I wasn't helping their strategy or anything like that. It was just me sharing my story on a stage, in front of these people. And I think that, a lot of what I included was just personal anecdotes, just my personal experiences, and how cystic fibrosis has affected me, and what I hope for the future of our community. And so I think that was, it was an awesome experience to be able to be invited and have that. So I hope to do more of those in the future too. But I think that was a recent moment that I would say has been really, really amazing, impactful, and definitely makes what I do worthwhile.
Yeah, that's so amazing. That sounds like such a great event. I would say for me, it's hard to think of one specific moment. I feel like it's a lot of little moments, mostly messages that I get on social media. So this is also related to my advocacy rather than like my career. Like I would say like more specific to my advocacy work in particular. But like, for example, every once in a while, I'll get a message on Facebook or on Instagram where someone has found my page or has read my book or has come across me in some way, and they, feel compelled to message me and tell me that, finding me or finding Remember the Girls has changed their life in some way, or has made them realize something, or has made them feel that they found a community, just anything along those lines. Whenever I get one of those messages, and they always just come, randomly, like every few months. Like that is what keeps me going. Like, it's not for me, like the awards that I've gotten and stuff like that. Like the accomplishments obviously are a part of it too, but it's like the small things. And it's not even coming from other advocates. Like it's coming from people who are not connected like with their community really at all. And they just happen to find me, and that brings them closer to the community, or helps them process their grief, or helps them understand more about what it means to be a carrier. Those are the moments that I know that my advocacy, Remember the Girls, and also hopefully through my career as a patient engagement consultant, just all go to, make the world better for people impacted by rare diseases. So
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's something that I feel like we haven't talked about too much yet, is really this, like the value and the impact in having this community of people that, we can connect with, that can understand us, that kind of, have the same experiences as we do, and that I feel like whom we can help and make their lives better and easier as well, and who can inspire us to do what we do, and continue doing. So I think that similarly to your experiences, especially after I received that phage therapy and kind of published, my story was like published everywhere, after that subsequently, I had a lot of people reaching out to me, mostly within the CF community, but also with other kind of infections, related to, and inquiring about, okay, tell me more about phage. Tell me, how you got this. Like, how can I do, how can I get this? And I was really just giving a lot of advice to people, and how they can just be, first of all, educating about phage therapy, but then also about how to self-advocate, and how they can kind of go about taking that same path, and what they should do and what they can do. And So at this point, I've definitely built such a strong network of people too within the rare disease space, but also the chronic, more broadly, the chronic disease space. And, like for example, in our Odyssey too, like I'm one of the moderators for the social meetups, which occur on the first Wednesday of every month. So whoever's listening, if y'all want to join, please do. And so that has, been a neat opportunity to be able to connect with other people that have, various conditions. But I find that like we all can kind of relate to one another to some degree in some way, right? Our experiences have some overlap, especially in the rare space, between caregivers and patients. And, I think that that's just been just one of the main highlights and benefits of, just the impact of, for my own life and what I feel like I've gotten from people. So
definitely the Our Odyssey meetups, especially during lockdown, like that would be like what I looked forward to every week. Like they were so much fun. And yeah, just getting to meet people, but also, knowing that these are people who have similar situations, but that a lot of others are also, pursuing advocacy at some level. I think it's like really empowering to be surrounded by people that you're not often able to be surrounded by in your everyday life. Like I have the best of friends, but like there's like I can't obviously relate with them with anything about rare disease or about having a passion for advocacy for something that affects you personally. Like I think it's really hard to find people in your everyday life, but then forums like this and groups like Our Odyssey, like it makes that connection so easy. And that's why we can learn from each other. And that's why I was so excited to be invited to speak on this event, especially with Ella, because I don't want to gatekeep. Like I want to just share everything possible because I want everyone to be able to do this, because I think that we all have such valuable skills and that we should, be able to be fairly compensated for using those skills. So yeah, like I'm so passionate about this topic, and like obviously we're both still decently early on in the career side of our advocacy, but like I want to just share as much as I can because I want people to be able to do the exact same thing. And like, if anyone wants to get in touch with me and, talk, of course, open for that. If, you can find me on social media. It's just at Rare Like Her. I don't think I can send that in the chat, but maybe Our Odyssey can share, or I think we're tagged in like the social media posts, both of us, so you can find us there. But yeah, I'm just always happy to continue talking about this. Definitely.
Likewise, yeah. Please, everybody, reach out as well. I'm happy to connect individually. Balasa.com, and then my social media is, well, depending on what platform, but on Instagram it's Ella Balasa Advocacy. So yeah, I don't know if we have any other questions, but if not, this has been a really, really awesome opportunity. And so thank you to Our Odyssey. And Taylor, it's been fantastic as always.
You too.
Definitely look forward to having more of these and keeping our connection close, because I mean this is a great example, as you said. Like, I think I was trying to think back on when we had connected, and I actually don't know. It's been a couple. I mean, it's been at least 2-3 years. Maybe it was through your. Maybe I'm not sure, honestly, but
I honestly have no idea. Like that's how, yeah, like I think it's been definitely 3 years. Like it was a while ago now. I don't even remember because we've had so many conversations and seen each other and have spoken together. Like it's just, yeah, I feel like we're a good example of this.
Yes.
Working relationship. Like it works really well.
But yeah, so thank you all for tuning in, and hope you all can gain some value from our presentations and our conversations. Definitely, again, reach out to us if you have any questions or want to connect. And of course, Our Odyssey has a lot of offerings like this, so definitely stay tuned for more things that come up. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening.
I'm ready to take on the world and take on the world with you. Are you ready to take on the world and take on the world with me? I am ready to take on the world. I am ready to take on the world.